Orleans Sports with Eric Asher is underwritten by
At Villere's Florist, we deliver the magic of flowers 7 days a week to the North Shore and South Shore in the New Orleans area. Whether it's for birthday parties, baby celebrations, Villere's provides colorful floral displays for all. With a store full of fresh-cut flowers, exotic tropical flowers, orchids, roses, and even fruit baskets, our goal is to make your vision a reality. Villere's Florist, proudly serving Louisiana since 1969. Mr. Ed's Oyster Bar and Fish House has been shucking here since 1979. Located at 3117 21st Street in Metairie, Mr. Ed's Oyster Bar and Fish House offers raw, fried, and grilled oysters, as well as a range of Cajun and Creole dishes. Enjoy a dozen with a smile.
Happy Valentine's Day and good evening, New Orleans. Welcome to Inside New Orleans Sports. I'm your host, Eric Asher. Over the next hour, we'll talk a lot about what's going on with the home teams. We'll talk about Anthony Davis and the New Orleans Pelicans. We'll talk about the LSU Tigers upsetting the University of Kentucky, number 5 in the nation at Rupp Arena. We'll talk about UNO basketball, Tulane basketball, give you a little preview of UNO, Tulane, and also LSU baseball. We have some time. We'll get to the Saints. Can you believe that? For like the second or third week in a row, we may get to the Saints, and we'll try to do that tonight. Always a great panel. These two guys, again, know this city inside and out when it comes to sports. Jude Young of CrescentCitySports.com, UNO, and also WGSO Radio, and Andrew Doak of WLAE-TV Sports. Guys, welcome to the show. Thanks so much for being with us. Jude, always like to start off letting the folks know what you're involved in. We'd like to give you a little bit more time because you got involved in so much stuff. Let her rip.
Well, you know you have to pay the bill somehow, so you do what you can. And it starts with CrescentCitySports.com. You can check us out all day, every day with the latest sports news and great analysis as well, high school, college, and the pros. Eric mentioned UNO. I'm the voice of UNO basketball as we enter the stretch run here in February. The Privateers in third place, battling for a Southland Conference championship. And I also host a radio show on WGSO 990 AM each and every week on Tuesday and Friday nights from 6 to 7. Tomorrow night being the one will get you into your sports weekend, depending on when you watch this. And there's plenty to talk about, Eric. That's the best part. Yes. It's the intersection of a lot of seasons and off seasons, and we have plenty of news to deal with. Yeah, I mean,
hopefully a lot of it's supposed to be better news than what we've had. It's been a rough month or so for people that live in Louisiana and in New Orleans. Of course, that kind of changed on Tuesday night with LSU's win. Andrew, welcome back. Always good to have you on the program. You guys do such a great job over at Channel 4 Sports. Tell us about what's happening.
I appreciate it. Yeah, thanks for having me on. Of course, we have shows at 5, 6, and 10 weeknights and on the weekend. Our 4th Down on 4 show on Sunday nights. We love to be able to break it down more in depth there on Sunday nights within that show. You can follow me on Twitter, Andrew Doak _WWL, and Andrew Doak WWL on Facebook. And thanks for having me.
Always
excited to be here again.
Yeah, me too. Glad to have both you guys, especially diving into the subject matter we're diving in tonight. Number 19 LSU, 20-4 now, 10-1 in the SEC, goes up to Rupp Arena, a place where they have not had a tremendous amount of success. Against a guy they have not had a tremendous amount of success in Calipari. He's only lost 8 games in his tenure up in Rupp Arena, which is amazing considering how many one and dones that he goes through each and every year. Look, I've seen a lot of LSU basketball. I was around as a young kid when Pete Maravich was there. I got to see the Dale Brown era, and of course now what we're seeing with Will Wade. This is one of the biggest wins in the history of the program.
And really, you talk about a win that shook up the college basketball world. I think if you saw the ESPN broadcast, you can see they were a little bit disappointed that some of the luster was taken off of the Kentucky-Tennessee showdown coming up this weekend. But now it's the Tigers who are in second place alone in the league behind Tennessee, waiting for a chance at the Vols, who are having maybe their best basketball season that they'll ever have under Rick Barnes, the great job he's doing there. But it's all about Will Wade and the team he's been able to build and have them come together as they've done this season. The 10-game winning streak, and the real turning point could have been the 1-point loss at home to Arkansas. Not that the Razorbacks aren't a decent team, but that could have thrown things sideways. Instead, LSU, seeing the more daunting part of their schedule, comes along and wins in Starkville against a very good Mississippi State team, had to go to overtime to do it. Then the big win at home against a talented Auburn team before surprising Kentucky at the buzzer. And the thing about all three of those games, this is an LSU team that, for good or bad, has to dig itself out of deficits quite a bit and finds a way to do so. And they're 3-0 in overtime in the league, and then be able to go to Rupp and keep your poise and make key plays down the stretch. Look, this is a team that has leaders on the floor, Tremont Waters and Naz Reid, a guard and a forward who can get things done. But this is a deep team, too. They can beat you on the glass. When they really lock in and defend like they did against Kentucky in the second half, they can do that, too. And that last part, that's going to be the key. This team has Final Four potential, but they could easily lose in the first round of the NCAAs first. That's how volatile it is in college basketball, and particularly when you throw this much talent together and maybe only have one season to have a bulk of it play together.
Yeah, no doubt about it. Andrew, what can you add?
Well, the interesting standpoint that Will Wade had in his availability before that matchup with Kentucky was he said he has a newfound appreciation for Coach Calipari and what he has to do with those one-and-dones every year. And obviously, at least with Naz Reid, potentially, he could be a one-and-done.
Yes.
We'll see about some of the other guys. But he's, finally seeing how tough that is to be able to bring in five. And look, I know you sit there and go, woe was you to bring in five-star talent. But still, it is tough to be able to take 18-year-old kids and put them on the floor. But it was a complete effort, both from the starters, and you got a lot of good production from your bench. Emmett Williams in the second half had some big buckets to be able to put you ahead and keep it a game. And finally, like you had said, they weren't down by double digits.
Yes.
Starting out in the first half. I was sitting there even as they were getting near halftime, and they went cold, and I was like, they just got to keep it within 5 here, be able to make a charge in the second half. But a signature win, no doubt, for Will Wade. Impressive from start to finish.
No doubt about it. And, of course, did it with Naz Reid only playing 21 minutes.
Yeah.
Some really ticky-tack fouls early against the Tigers. It evened out in the second half. Again, as much as the fouls kind of went against LSU in the first half, you got to give the officials credit for kind of evening it out in the second half. And look, the length, the athleticism, I think they are so much of a better team when they stay away from the deep shot and they attack the glass. And you saw that in the second half. I actually tweeted it out during the game that, if they're to win this game, they got to win. They got to go to the basket. They attack the basket and attack the glass. When they do that with the length and athleticism they have, they are tough to beat.
Right. When you look at them offensively, what I like to see is the fact that even early in the season, they're very good at spacing the floor. They oftentimes play three guards, and a Skylar Mays, a Javonte Smart. They're really good guards to be out there with Waters. But at the same time, sometimes it's Waters, a sophomore who carried the team offensively as a freshman last year. I don't want to call it hero ball, but he takes a little bit too much upon himself, and he did so on LSU's second to last shot against Kentucky, too, where they settled for a bad shot versus running offense. That will happen sometimes when you have a guard that can get his shot one-on-one as much as Waters can. So they're still trying to figure that out at times during games because they have so many different options. But again, they're growing, they're learning, and when you win close games and you're able to win in overtime, that just tells you that not only do you have the leadership on the floor, but this is an unselfish team, and Naz Reid can get into foul trouble, and Cavell Bigby-Williams, who had the big tip in, can play well down the stretch. Emmett Williams can take advantage of his minutes, and these guys are hungry to get those minutes. When that number's called upon, it's key for a coach to know who he can rely upon to put out there to produce, and when you do it at Rupp Arena, you can do it anywhere.
Yeah, and defensively also, again, with the length and athleticism they have. Look, I love when this team goes full court press. They went to that diamond press against Kentucky, and they gave them fits. It reminds me a lot of the Dale Brown era. Again, when he had the freak defense, when he'd go full court press, they have so much athleticism and length out there, and they can come at you in waves. That's the type of game they have to play. When they do that, they seem to be able to take over a game.
I love that aggressiveness. The one weakness that I find that LSU has had throughout the season is down low, their big men defensively. You turn on the tape with Daniel Gafford from Arkansas.
Oh, yeah.
He went to work. He had like 32 in the first matchup, 23 in the second. And look, P.J. Washington for Kentucky having 20 points, I think you can kind of live with that. At the end of the day, I think you're not going for 30. And of course, Gafford for Arkansas, he's probably going to be a lottery pick. So I'm nitpicking him right there. But as you mentioned, when they're going to the glass, they're such a great offensive rebounding team.
Yes, they are.
That those guys are going to be able to go and clean the glass and be able to get great second chance opportunities, and the more you're able to do that, I think the greater position this LSU team is to win ball games.
Now, Bigby-Williams, again, if the cylinder goes all the way to space, that probably should have not been allowed.
Sure.
But after everything that, again, sports fans have gone through with officiating in this town over the last couple months, I think we kind of deserved one. But with that said, I still felt comfortable if they went to overtime against Kentucky.
No reason to think LSU couldn't have won in that scenario. True, but the reality was that a defensive goaltend was missed with 1.3 seconds left, an arm through the rim.
I think it was P.J. Washington, right?
So again, the refs let them play. It's going at a high speed. It's a transition play in the final seconds, and the officials are just trying to get into position to see what's going on there. They did the right thing. They went to the monitor to see if the shot counted, not to wipe it out because it was too close to call, and they let the players decide the game. Fancy that. Let the players decide the game, and only when something is obvious and blatant, call it. Tell Roger Goodell he might want to look into that. But as far as college basketball goes and where LSU's placed right now, there are a lot of things that they're doing well. We talked about defense before. You have to go back to it. I just don't know if they're going to be able to survive without outscoring the very best teams if they're going to make a run deep in March. What it comes down to is they have to pick their poison. In the second half against Kentucky, they collapsed around the lane defensively. Drive and kick was there for the Wildcats. If you run into a team that's hitting their outside shots, you might be in trouble. Fortunately, a lot of nights, LSU can bring the firepower to overcome that, come up with steals because their guards have very quick hands and get into passing lanes. So there's enough strengths there to make up for weaknesses. And outside of maybe Duke, and even those guys get down by 20 and have to come back. Sure. Nobody has a perfect team. There's going to be some weaknesses. This LSU team might have the fewest weaknesses of any we've seen, and I'm going back to the Dale Brown era. They're that good.
Yeah, they are. That call, what did you think? Should have been made? Should it not have been made?
Well,
I don't know. At that point, could they review it?
Well, was that not a part of the review? It was just whether or not it went in?
I thought it was touched.
Okay, I think you're right. Yeah, you're right. Because I guess they can't review that.
Right.
But I mean, I don't know. It looked like the deflection. It was coming off of the rim, of course. But you're right. If it's all the way to space,
right?
I mean, but yeah, the explanation and the rule that I was looking up after the game was that moment can't be reviewed whether or not
that's what I understood
it's
as well.
inside the cylinder.
And honestly, that should be changed. We're talking about a rule that they've had right internationally for decades now, that you can play the ball on the rim. They were worried about some giant sitting under the rim and blocking shots, like in football years ago. Some teams tried to have a leaper block field goals at the crossbar. It's really unrealistic when you talk about a 10-foot obstacle here to deal with. They should change that, especially with the game being played above the rim as much as it is now, because those are the type of exciting plays that fans want to see.
Yeah, no doubt. All right, Georgia, Florida, Tennessee, A&M at home. Okay, then at Alabama, at Florida, Vandy at home to be able to finish out the regular season in the SEC tournament. Talk about, again, this team getting better, getting more. When you look at them growing, because they're a very young team, and that to me has to be the maturity of this team is what I'm worried about more than anything else. I think they're talented. I think they're well coached. But again, will they mature under fire here going forward? How do they take this Kentucky win? Now, do they come out and they drop an A against Georgia?
Sure.
Or do they keep it going knowing they got Tennessee that's coming up in another week from Saturday? So your thoughts on how this team is growing, and do you anticipate them maturing under fire?
Well, I think the good thing is that while they do have a lot of young talent on this team, they do have some veteran leadership that I feel like can come into play. Cavell Bigby-Williams is a junior. And so I think that there's still some guys on this team that can help them mature along throughout this season. But it's a great point that you bring up. How do you handle this Kentucky win coming off and going up against Georgia? And I'm interested to see that Tennessee game. It's going to be a real fun game to watch, especially because you get them in Baton Rouge. When I was at the Maravich Center a couple weeks, I guess it was last week, watching the Arkansas game 2 weeks ago, I haven't seen it rocking like that in a long time.
Yes.
That crowd's into it in Baton Rouge. They're behind that team. That could be a difference. When it comes down to who wins the SEC potentially, and I know there's still going to be games left after that, but you're right. How they handle that win in Rupp Arena is going to speak volumes to what they were able to do the rest of the year.
And Wade is not ignoring the elephant in the room. He talked about his concern about the importance of the Auburn game, keeping it going into Rupp, and having the fans fired up, and maybe setting yourself up to do just this, keep that momentum rolling and really have the PMAC rocking back to those Deaf Dome days of Dale Brown. So he's been candid about that publicly. He's talked to his team about the importance of, look, we can't let up. We have to focus on every single game because, look, the Kentucky win is great, but imagine if we wouldn't have lost to Arkansas. If we would take care of business at home against a team that, quote unquote, we're supposed to beat. We've got a few of those games coming up, but you've got a Florida team you've got to play twice under Mike White, who, of course, prepped in New Orleans and is an outstanding coach. They're desperate, the Gators are, to make any sort of postseason. So there are no easy touches right now in the SEC. It's deeper and better as a league than it's been maybe ever from 1 to now 14, and that's showing you just how good this LSU team is because look at their record. They're 10-1. That says it all.
Right, and of course, then you got the SEC tournament coming up, which again we know how that is. But because of where you're going to be seated, you're going to get a chance to be able to get a little rest before then. All right, guys, let's shift gears from LSU. You're the voice of UNO basketball. How are things going?
Well, right now UNO is licking its wounds a little bit, coming off of a tough homecoming loss to Nichols, a Nichols team that shoots nearly half of their shots from the floor from three-point range. This was a game where they made 50% of them, and UNO couldn't come up with a couple of key stops late. So now they have to bounce back, but the Privateers are battling for the number 2 spot in the league. It's almost impossible for Sam Houston State, undefeated in the conference, 4 games ahead in the loss column of the Privateers at this point, to lose number 1. But number 2 is almost equally as important because when you're in a league like the Southland, you're trying to make the NCAA tournament through the conference tournament, and the top 2 teams in the league, the top 2 seeds in the conference tournament, get double byes all the way to the semifinals. You only have to win 2 to go to the big dance. So UNO is a game behind in the loss column of Abilene Christian. They're a good veteran team, and they're tied with one of the co-champions of last year, Southeastern, and the outstanding guard from Helen Cox, Marlon Veal, in his senior year. 2 games coming up between the Privateers and the Lions, and this has become a rivalry very quickly and a fun one to watch that local fans may not know about. So check your calendar. It's going to be on Wednesday, the first matchup at the Lakefront, another one down the line in the regular season finale for both. There is good basketball to watch locally, not just LSU, just maybe not the guys who play in the Smoothie King.
There you go. We'll get to them in just a few minutes. Andrew, you've been out at Tulane. Dunleavy's really struggling this year, but he got a vote of confidence for Troy Dannon this week, saying he's going to be back next year. Supposedly they have some really good recruits coming in next year as well. What are your thoughts? Because there are some people out there that really expected more out of Dunleavy, by this time. Now, look, he's only been there a short time, but especially, again, with the pedigree, NBA ties, international ties. A lot of people thought it was going to be an instant transformation. It's been a little bit more rockier than a lot of people thought it was going to be.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest with you, they've been lost in the back burner because they're only at, 4 wins this season? I mean, they've really just gotten lost in the mix, obviously with so much news with Anthony Davis and whatnot, but just because they're basically irrelevant right now. But that's been a head-scratcher to see it not translate, and how much does that have to do with him being a little bit older and not being able to recruit the same way that some other coaches are able to and spend time on the road. But I know Tulane, in baseball deals with it as well, but it's tough to be able to recruit there for a number of different circumstances financially. And I'm not unsure how much that comes into play, but I'm sure it's worth bringing up as well. But yeah, I mean, to lose Melvin Frazier and a couple of guys last year to the NBA draft, I mean, maybe he didn't see them being able to put together their game as fast as they.
But they did it under his tutelage. And
no,
again,
they did.
For anybody that's out there that again has aspirations to play in the NBA, and again, look, maybe these are more international kids or local kids. There's a guy that has NBA ties. He knows NBA scouts. Again, he comes from NBA programs. He's coached some of the greatest NBA players out there. And you saw the transformation in Melvin Frazier's game under his tutelage. So again, that has to be something that Tulane fans can hang their hat on if they're truly going to stay with Dunleavy going forward. Now, it'll be interesting to see what this class is coming in and how well these guys can come in and make the transformation. Some of those guys are international players. Again, they got a nice international player on the roster right now. But again, it's tough sledding, man, especially now when you've got LSU playing really well. Again, Celeste has got the program at UNO on the right track, and you got some other state schools that play pretty good basketball as well.
That's from a local attention standpoint. That's part of the problem. But the bigger problem is you're in the American. And look, I don't want to beat up Tulane athletics because in a lot of areas they've made great improvements, particularly facilities improvements, and they put a lot of money into Devlin Fieldhouse. But at the same time, I've been around and seen a lot of college basketball arenas, and Tulane has the worst one in their league. I mean, no offense, it's as good as it can be, but this is a huge obstacle that you're recruiting to. Now, they're putting money into other facilities because it's just as important or maybe more to have great practice facilities, training, weight rooms, everything involved there on a 365 basis. But this is really hard for a Tulane program that hasn't done anything significant in decades, for a guy like Dunleavy whose name doesn't mean a 60-year-old. It doesn't mean a lot to 18-year-olds or the 16-year-olds you're trying to get in the door with to get these classes together. He's got some talent coming in. His staff is figuring it out. He has figured out how to coach on the college level. It's a much different game, and Tulane was really lost that first season. So he's going to get another year or maybe two to see if he can make progress in the American. Look, if next year Tulane's winning a vast majority of these non-conference games, based on the way they schedule, they should, and they can put together a few wins in conference play, that's progress. And I think Troy Dannon, the athletic director, understands it's a long-haul problem with Tulane basketball. They're facing a much stiffer challenge, I should say, than any of the other programs that Tulane has on campus. It is that daunting. A lot of money has been put into coaches and facilities and arenas in the American, and Tulane's still playing catch-up.
So let's switch to UNO baseball. Again, Blake Dean, talk about what he's got coming back, and talk about when you look forward to this season, what is expected from this program?
Well, they were picked anywhere from 7th to 11th outsiders, a couple of mid-major sites in the Southland, so expectations a little bit low from the outside looking in, but there's a lot more expectations inside, thinking this is going to be a good team. You've got Bo Bratton and Pierce Howard, two all-conference level players in the lineup that can really hit. A lot of newcomers, as well as in the weekend rotation, which is a problem, but there's more arm talent on the roster than the Privateers have had, as Dean has been able to build it up now going into his 4th season. But he did lose Brian Warzek, a high draft pick, very good ace who was as good as any pitcher in the Southland. Yes. They have to figure it out on the weekends, but they have Reese Martin, John Barr, two guys who were on the National Stopper of the Year watch list. They're that good at the back end. If they can piece together the pitching, I guarantee you a former All-American hitter who can teach players how to become better hitters as well as anybody in Dean with his staff will figure it out otherwise, and they'll have a solid season. He's a really solid young coach, and you don't think when you look at him now that he's somebody that's still so young compared to most of his contemporaries in that job.
Andrew, you've been up to LSU again. Everybody talking about this is a year they're going to be in Omaha. When you look at what they're bringing back, you look at what they've gotten. Talk a little bit about Maneri's team this year.
Well, the Friday night starter was something that was a bit of a head scratcher a little bit to me. I thought that Zach Hess was going to be moved back to the bullpen, but he is a guy who has first-round talent as a pitcher. I mean, from a velocity standpoint and the different pitches that he has everything in the toolbox that you need. I'm interested to see his maturation this year, though, because I think he went into the mindset last year that he's still a closer, that he's still a reliever. You can't come out humming at 99 miles an hour and expect to be able to keep that over 7 innings. But when you bring back Zach Hess, Zach Watson, Antoine Duplantis, all guys who were selected in the Major League Baseball draft and passed on that to come back to LSU, that speaks volume, and it makes you think about the year where they brought back the Fab Four. Whenever you talk about Cole Freeman and Kramer Robertson, Poche and Dykeman, and it has that special buzz around it. And Maneri's talked about having it feels like they have 3 different recruiting classes. Yes. The -- 1 recruiting class that they brought in, the major leaguers that they brought back, and then the guys Eric Walker and Josh Smith at shortstop. Both of Josh Smith, he said he thinks could be the best shortstop in America. Now he says glowing praise about a lot of different guys. So I mean, take that with a grain of salt. But we've seen flashes from him, back to his freshman season as well. But getting back Eric Walker and Josh Smith, I think, are just important as those other 2 phases. I don't see why LSU baseball at the end of the year won't be in Omaha. It would have to take some major injuries, I think, like last season. Right. But I'm interested to see Saturday and Sunday throughout their rotation as well. Destrehan's Landon Marceau is going to be on Saturday, and I forget the guy on Sunday. Can you think of his name?
It should be Walker, I believe.
No, Walker's going to be pitching on Wednesday, actually.
Right.
But his cousin, his cousin used to play at LSU. Okay. But anyway, he was one really highly recruited quarterback from Arkansas. Anyway, the starting rotation this weekend is going to be really interesting. But the sky's the limit for this LSU baseball team, in my opinion.
And I completely agree, because they have a little bit of everything. They have a lineup that should have balance with some power in the middle. We'd even mention Saul Garza, who's the most exciting newcomer that will play every day in the lineup and bat high in the order to go along with all those veterans that you mentioned. When it comes down to it, even if Hess has to be moved into another role, they have answers to be able to go into those roles. And you talk about the potential. Let's say it doesn't work out for Hess as a starter. He goes to the back of the bullpen and forms a 1-2 punch with Todd Peterson, who was a revelation late last season. That's the worst thing that can happen other than injuries. Look, Maneri's got a team that's picked 1 or 2 by every poll in the country, and there's a reason why they're that good. I'm not going to say there's no reason that they shouldn't be in Omaha, because college baseball is much harder these days.
Sure.
And you get into these best 2 out of 3s or these regionals, anything can happen. But LSU should be a national seed, and if you do that, chances are, going through Alex Box, that LSU's going to be in Omaha and give themselves a chance. They have pretty much a complete roster, and the type of depth where they just brought back, because of an injury, a spot opening up for Chris Reed, who could start for a lot of teams in the country as a corner infielder, who had given up baseball because he just wanted to play for LSU. Now he's the 35th guy. That tells you the kind of depth that Maneri's built, and that's what he's paid to do.
Andrew, let's talk a little bit about Tulane baseball, and I'd like you both to chime in on that. Travis Jude was on a little bit of a hot seat here. You know, one thing you could hang your hat on at Tulane was baseball. Okay, you knew they were going to be a top contender in whatever conference they were in. You knew that they had a chance to really get to Omaha. Jones did a great job with that program when Rick Jones was there. When you look at it now, kind of on a downside, that there really is a hot seat right now for Jewett. What do you think about this team this year? I know they bring Latham in to be able to fool with the pitchers. They weren't happy there. He's a guy that's known in Tulane lore as one of the great pitchers in their history. What do you think about this year's version of the Greenies?
Latham was a huge hire. You saw what he did at Southeastern.
Yes.
It was unbelievable. I was actually at Southeastern just the other day, and what Matt Reiser's done with that program is unbelievable, and I think that puts a little bit more heat on Travis Jewett's seat when you see what he's done out with the Lions. 3 NCAA tournament appearances in 5 years. But when it comes to Tulane, they've got to get back to the postseason somehow. Jewett obviously cut his teeth and was an assistant under Tim Corbin at Vanderbilt. Obviously a great coach who's won a national title, taken his team to Omaha multiple times. And for whatever reason, at Tulane, they just haven't been able to put it together. And I mentioned earlier about the scholarship issue. It's a hurdle that they have to overcome. But no matter who's in there, they're going to find someone else to be able to overcome it if it's not Travis Jewett. They got to get some better guys on the mound. It was something that was a big issue for them last year. They didn't have enough arms. But just I couldn't tell you what the answer is. If I knew the answer exactly, I probably would be a college baseball coach. But they're not getting it done so far right now, and they got to find a way to be able to get it turned around quickly if you're Travis Jewett.
Piggyback on what
right, and it's not only just finding the right kind of talent, but it's maximizing the talent. Latham comes in with a roster that I think Tulane has arm talent, but they're working on the different things about movement with your pitches more than worrying about the guys who can throw the hardest, because it's the ability to move the ball and have that, because spin rate's so important nowadays. Understanding that, adjusting your grip and being able to do that. And I think Tulane has a chance to be very good on the weekends, and Jewett showed that excitement at Media Day, because Caleb Roper, a local product who went to Arizona, has had injuries. Now he's healthy. He has Friday night stuff for a big-time program if he pitches up to his potential. Keegan Gillies is another guy who's local, another Catholic League guy like Roper Rummel, Gillies from Brother Martin, who's a tall pitcher who was never a big velo guy. But the thing is, if you're a 6'8" presence on the mound and throwing on that downward plane, Latham working with him on movement on his pitches to take advantage of what he brings, his natural talents. And Tulane's going to have to maximize that to be successful. Look, 27 wins year one after winning season, and what the success Tulane has had over the years, and then another losing season with 25 wins, that's unacceptable. But this is another Dannon hire, so if he can simply have a winning season, I think he'll get another one. I feel pretty safe to say that, but there's no guarantees, because the American's a good baseball league too, and Tulane's picked 6 out of 9 teams.
Well, and I'll ask you both, how much is Dannon on the hot seat here? Willie Fritz, obviously, he's paying off in football. Dunleavy has not paid off in basketball thus far, and Jewett hasn't played off in baseball. You know, is he on the hot seat here? Is he going to get some rope down the line if these two coaches don't work out? Do they all need more time? Are we asking too much with all the things you've talked about, Andrew? How difficult it is with grades and cost and how many scholarships you can give at Tulane? Are we asking too much for this program?
Right, there are legitimate excuses, and what you said was important. But Willie Fritz, football is king, and as long as football's going to bowl games and winning them, which hey, it looks like Fritz is set up to do long term here, then there's a lot of pressure off on all the other sports. But baseball's a little different, because that is the one that Tulane fans can hang their hats on. Right, but I think there's an understanding that things have changed. Not having the city college on campus and how they were able to to work that with
Yes.
baseball. These are the little things that fans
Explain
don't
that to
know.
people that don't know what that
Right.
was.
Well, the City College was in place, and not for baseball,
No.
obviously, but it helped as far as defraying tuition costs, because you're talking about night school, off-hours classes, and when that disappeared, that really hurt the baseball program. Plus changes in rules, not being able to take in transfers the first year. Rick Jones thrived on
Yes,
that.
he
When
did.
that went away, that hurt him after Katrina as well. And then it's the issue of you're trying to field a 35-man roster at a private school with exorbitant tuition, and you have, what, 11.7 scholarship,
Right, which is
0.7.
ridiculous.
What's 0.7 of a player? You're basically cutting it into little pieces to try to help players, and you're trying to find guys who are academically qualified for scholarships. If they're Louisiana kids, it's tops. It is extremely complicated. And oh, by the way, Travis Jewett, that's a learning curve for him. He came from Power 5 programs
Yes.
of baseball who had far different issues, and they weren't private schools that had that much of a crunch. Look up Vanderbilt and why they're successful in baseball. They've got a hidden advantage as far as tuition being paid for all because of their endowment that most schools don't have. That's why they win. No offense to Tim Corbin. He's a good coach too, but Vanderbilt might be the best baseball job in the country. Tulane is not, but it's still a really good one, and I think Jewett has another year or two to figure it out.
What can you add?
As far as Troy Danon or just Jewett?
Jewett and Dan, either way.
I would put it this way. If Travis Jewett doesn't get them back to the postseason this year, if I was Troy Danon, I would take a hard look at some of the guys that are here locally as a coach.
Right.
And Matt Reiser would be number one
I
on
would
my
think
list.
so, right?
What he's done there at Southeastern is really unprecedented. And they'd only been to the tournament 3 times in their history since 1947 before Reiser got there. He's already taken them 3 times in 5 years. And they're probably going to have a good chance to be able to make a run at a regional this year. They obviously have to overcome some other hurdles because of their competition. They can't get the same RPI that some other teams can. But look, I think with some local talent being as great as they are, I think that puts Jewett even on a hotter seat.
Is Dannon more tied to Jewett and Dunleavy or more tied to what Fritz does in your mind?
That's a good question. I don't know. I would defer to what Jude said. I think football is king, and I think as an athletic director, you're going to hang your hat on football, especially in an area like this,
Deep
where if
South,
you went to the
yes.
postseason, you won a bowl game.
Right.
There's a lot of momentum there. I'm tying my knot to the football coach.
Yeah.
And look, when it comes to the other 2 sports, they're kind of ancillary, but I would lean towards baseball since it's been a point of emphasis at Tulane for so long and a sport that you could count on.
You're watching Inside New Orleans Sports on this Valentine's night. Andrew Doak of WLAE-TV Sports, Jude Young of CrestCitySports.com are our guests. We'll shift gears. We'll talk some Anthony Davis when we come back. We'll also talk some New Orleans Saints. Going to give these guys a chance to chime in on National Signing Day, how LSU and Tulane did as well. All that coming up here on Inside New Orleans Sports. I'm your host, Eric Asher. Stick around for our underwriters.
Air Conditioning, Heating, and Refrigeration has been family-owned and operated since 1989. Burkhart has energy-efficient solutions and offers brands such as Mitsubishi ductless AC units and Amana, the only manufacturer with a lifetime unit replacement warranty. Burkhart's offers maintenance bundle packages that include servicing your AC, generator, and tankless water heater. For more information on the services Burkhart's provides, visit acpromise.com. Burkhart's Air Conditioning, Heating, and Refrigeration, providing comfort for life.
Located at 3701 Iberville Street in Mid-City is Katie's Restaurant and Bar. Open 7 days a week, Katie's offers daily specials for lunch, dinner, and Sunday brunch. Serving New Orleans cuisine such as fried shrimp platters, grilled redfish, and a fully stocked bar. And don't forget about our expanded event seating and local entertainment. Featured on the Best of Food Network's diners, drive-ins, and dives, Katie's Restaurant and Bar. Welcome back to Inside New Orleans Sports. I'm your host, Eric Asher. Tonight, Jude Young of CrestCitySports.com and Andrew Doak of WLAE-TV Sports are our guests. We shift gears to the New Orleans Pelicans. What was had a tremendous amount of enthusiasm going into the season, especially after the way things left off last year with the sweep of Portland. Even though playing against a tough Golden State team, a lot of people felt that this team was ready to take the next step. You lose Rajon Rondo, you lose Boogie Cousins. Obviously, the Boogie Cousins situation a little bit different because of the injury. Couldn't expect him to sign Boogie Cousins and maybe only having him playing like the type of minutes he's playing for the Golden State Warriors. When you can sign a guy like that, you expect him to be ready to go at the beginning of the season. The Rajon Rondo situation,
is unforgivable, concerning, again, the influence he had on this roster, the influence he had on Anthony Davis. That was just a bonehead move on the part of Dell Demps and the organization. But here we are. Anthony Davis said at the beginning of the season he would not talk about wanting to be traded or whether he was going to sign that Supermax deal. 5 years, $240 million. He wouldn't even talk about it until June. And it was good for the organization. It was good for Anthony Davis because, again, you have a chance to be able to see at least what this team can do. That all went away about 10 days ago when Clutch Sports, Rich Paul, Anthony Davis, of course that's his new representation, no longer Thad Fuscher, the New Orleans native who was his original agent. Between Clutch Sports, Rich Paul, Anthony Davis, they tried to bully their way out of New Orleans. There was tampering, there was collusion between LeBron James, between the Lakers. But yet Adam Silver, the commissioner of the NBA, who has been a big advocate of having a team here in New Orleans, sat silent. Instead, the NBA, in a roundabout way, said that if the Pelicans did not reach the threshold that would allow them to sit Anthony Davis after he was not traded at the deadline, and that they could be subject to a $100,000 a game fine and possibly loss of draft choices. Now, the panel here tonight knows it inside and out, as a lot of us do. They're covering this story on a day-in, day-out basis. Since then, after this attempted coup failed, we've been in a situation now where AD was on the floor the other night in the 118-88 blowout by the Orlando Magic at home at the Smoothie King Center. His line, 3 points, 1 for 9 from the field, 1 for 2 for the free throw line, 6 rebounds, a lethargic effort, grabbing his finger, grabbing his leg, did not want to be there. And now this looks like, again, it's a cancer that has permeated throughout this team. Something has to be done. Anthony Davis cannot be on this team after the All-Star break. They have to break free from this. The divorce has to be final. And the team has to move on, and Davis has to move on. It is time to start looking toward next year. We turn to our panel now. Guys, I don't think we've seen this in any other NBA city. This is unfair on what they're putting the Pelicans through right now. Again, possibly wanting to fine them $100,000 a game. 23 games left after the All-Star break. J.R. Smith this year of the Cleveland Cavaliers, Enes Kanter, Chandler Parsons of the Memphis Grizzlies, Carmelo Anthony, Oklahoma City. All were told, go away. We're going to pay your salary. It was a mutual situation between the player and the team. But again, the NBA has not come down on any one of those markets, any one of those teams. They want a top 5 player to be able to play. But yet we've seen them in the past when teams tank or when teams are not playing well, even with a superstar, they're taking off national TV. They put a better game on. This can be worked out between the NBA and the Pelicans. All this is doing right now is hurting the season ticket holder, the devout Pelican fan here in New Orleans, and honestly, it's hurting the franchise reputation. Jude, I'll take you first. This has been 2.5 weeks of hell if you're a Pelicans fan. And for those of us that are commenting on every day, it's getting tiresome.
Has it really been only that long? That's only 2 or 3 4th down on 4 episodes.
Right.
But it sure feels like it's been going on for years already.
Yeah.
Well, let's just put it this way. At this point, you have to accept, if you're going to follow the NBA, whether you're a fan of the Pelicans or the league in general, that it is a players' league. They don't hold all the power, but they hold so much power that all of these situations that come up, even one that started with a player doing something that he shouldn't have had his agent do and was fined for it, a paltry $50,000 in the grand scheme of things, but that's all they could fine him with because of the collective bargaining agreement in that league. But starting with that, it still matters what Davis thinks. And if Davis is going to act like that on the floor, does that mean he's close to saying after the All-Star break, okay, I'll agree to sit out? Because it seems like it has to be mutual for it to work. Right now, it doesn't look like it is, and the league feels like that's an unacceptable situation. To me, this is the first time that you've had a player need to be fined for requesting a trade through his agent during the season, and therefore, even though the Pelicans were really already out of it as far as the playoffs go, completely sabotaging the season for the team. If a player does that, the team should be able to unilaterally do what it needs to do. I contend, and I think you do too, that over the final 23 games of the season, the Pelicans will be a better basketball team without Anthony Davis. And that should be whoever's in charge over on airline of this basketball organization's first line to Adam Silver and whoever else he has to talk to. Look, he doesn't want to be here. He's torn between two worlds, and so are we. But we know what direction we need to go in. If you want to have a conference and talk with him and his representation and get this right, we'll get it right. But if he doesn't want to or doesn't want to play ball with us on this by not playing ball, It's not in the best interest of our organization to play him. It was a bad influence, as you saw in that Magic game, on the other players, especially the young players that you're still trying to evaluate moving forward. You're still trying to evaluate Alvin Gentry as a head coach, conceivably. Who knows if he's going to come back or not? Most think he won't, but we don't know that. And he's just trying to coach his tail off right now, and he's held firm in the public eye under all the scrutiny. That's more than we can say for Anthony Davis, who's spouting the company line when he is in front of cameras and showing somebody who doesn't want to be on the court in front of the cameras when it really counts. Look, if I'm the Pelicans, I take a chance, but I do it in a way where I state my case and say, look, we don't want to go to court or arbitration over this, but we should be allowed to do what's in the best interest of the New Orleans Pelicans. For once here, the team should matter more than the player, and I think that's a problem the NBA is going to keep dealing with more and more as we go forward. And I'm not saying it's going to destroy the league, but it could destroy markets like this one.
Andrew.
Well, for so long, Anthony Davis has cared so much about how he's perceived and how much he likes to be liked by other people.
Loves to be loved.
You're tearing your legacy apart. And I'm trying to figure it out because by you coming out and saying, I'm healthy enough, I want to play, you're putting the Pelicans, the team that you don't want to play for anymore, in a bad position. And I can't figure out if you're trying to do it out of spite because you didn't get traded and you're just you're a crybaby now.
I think
you're
that's
just like,
exactly
well, I didn't get my way. You didn't trade me to the Lakers. So now I'm just going to go out there and play backyard basketball to really throw a wrench in whatever you guys have going on the rest of the season. That's what it seems like to me. Of course, we can't get any answers out of any management or Anthony Davis, really, because, well, they just defer you to upper management, who's not available to talk right now. So where does the conversation go from here? At the end of the day, Anthony Davis has a lot of people speaking on his behalf. And he's got to understand that when they speak on your behalf, they're speaking for you. And if you don't understand that, then you need to understand that. After this All-Star break, in my opinion, the Pelicans and Anthony Davis should have some talk behind closed doors to say, hey, you got some kind of nagging knee injury, and you're going to be on the injury report from here on out, and you're just going to go home. We're going to give you your checks, but you're not going to be a boyfriend or girlfriend who broke up with a significant other and still wants to come over to their house and hang out.
Right, they're still going out on Valentine's Day.
Not just that. They're still living together.
Yeah, they're still living together. Like this isn't a situation that's going to continue to go on. It's really ridiculous at this point. And from Adam Silver's standpoint, he never catches any heat. Roger Goodell, obviously in the NFL, and for good reason, catches a lot of heat. This is absolutely ridiculous. And you look like a commissioner who cares more about the big market teams than you do about the small market teams. And your small market teams, in plenty of instances, the Spurs and Oklahoma City, like they put together great products that contribute to the league, that even bring in viewership and have won multiple championships. And yet you're just deciding to push this franchise to the wayside. What if Anthony Davis were to somehow tear an ACL?
Right.
The life of this franchise could potentially be in danger and be threatened because the next team could only have him on a one-year rental.
Right.
If he tore an ACL or ripped an Achilles like DeMarcus Cousins last year, they're not getting anything back for him.
He's an unrestricted free agent.
Yeah, and you're literally talking about the Pelicans having nothing that they get back in return, no draft picks because they've sent them all away to be able to build the foundation, and you can't get anyone here in free agency. That's part of the reason why Anthony Davis wants to leave is because I would imagine he feels like he can't get anyone to come team up with them.
But how much is that on him as well?
It is on him.
I mean, if you're a superstar,
being a follower
you should be,
instead of a leader. That's what
you
it's
should be able to recruit other players to play with you.
You should, and in my opinion,
more than Julius Randle. No disrespect.
Sure. No, and I mean, shoot, Julius Randle and Elfrid Payton, I think were good pulls this offseason, but yeah, they're not superstars. They're not top 10 NBA players. I was listening to Shaq earlier last week, and he said, look, if I were Anthony Davis, I'd be staying in New Orleans because I would want to recruit players to play there because you're going to get a much bigger paycheck. Now, the reality is all these players have a house in California or a second home wherever they want to live. But you live there during the season. Heck, Drew Brees has a house out in San Diego whenever he's not playing in New Orleans. He loves New Orleans, but he also loves San Diego too. It's like don't get it twisted. So all these guys have the ability, for the most part, the superstars, have the ability to have multiple homes and live wherever they want. But look, he's just in a situation where he didn't get his way. And so what he's trying to do is just spite the franchise right now. And it looks bad for everybody. And really the losers in all of this are the fans who show up to support this team that are really invested in them. And they built a lot of momentum last year whenever they went on that playoff run. And anybody that says basketball can't be relevant here in New Orleans, I think you're misguided. It might not be as there might not be as much fever as football, but I still think it has a good base here. And if you produce a consistent winner, it's going to continue to grow.
You mentioned something about legacy, and I think you're right on point. And I mentioned this on the radio show, and I've done it on social media this week. Baron Davis, when he forced his way out of New Orleans, again, he was the first big star here when the franchise relocated. Because of the sour taste that he left in everyone's mouth, you don't hear Baron Davis' name being spoken. Hornet/Pelican, even though he never played for the Pelicans. Chris Paul, a little bit different, okay?
Yeah.
I mean, you look at George Shinn, cash poor as an owner, look at the NBA taking over the team, and you look at the years that he gave to the Pelican, the Hornet/Pelicans. I think people, again, still revere Chris Paul, still love Chris Paul here. And one day, Chris Paul's jersey will be in the rafters at the Smoothie King Center. Anthony Davis will hold every record that's relevant for the Pelicans when he walks out the door this summer. And look, up until now, I think people understand it's been 7 years. And if Dell Demps couldn't put a winner around Anthony Davis in 7 years, then he deserves the opportunity to go elsewhere and try to win a championship. I think most people would say, no problem. They don't like the way this is being handled now.
That's the problem.
Okay, and again, what ultimately this is going to do is this is going to hurt his legacy here in New Orleans to the point that 23 may not be hanging in the rafters one day because of the way he's pushing his way out and the bad taste in the mouth that he's going to leave with the fans who have shown him nothing but love here in New Orleans since he was drafted out of Kentucky.
Chris Paul handled his business in the offseason at a convenient time, and that's what was expected if Davis was going to leave, that he would do as well, because it didn't go down that way. He should and is paying for it. Unfortunately, the Pelicans shouldn't be, because let's talk about national perception and of the franchise. First, anything before Benson bought the team doesn't count. George Shinn was a bad owner who should have never moved the franchise from Charlotte to begin with, but fortunately, New Orleans got a team back as a result. But since then, you can talk about Dell Demps all you want, and we have hashed and rehashed his decision-making, but he's been trying to win. He's been pushing all in too much trying to win, but he's been trying. It just hasn't worked out.
His plan was probably the wrong plan, but his heart was in the right place. I'll give him that.
Right, so saying, well, New Orleans deserves it because management didn't get it right. We hear that on the national level. It's disgusting because, hey, the plans didn't work, and some of that was bad luck with injuries, but New Orleans was constantly trying to win. They weren't going below the salary cap worried about the floor. They were trying to push the ceiling.
They were in the top 5, I think, last year in terms of salary cap.
Right, and folks don't talk about that because they want to make the Pelicans look like the bad guy, because even the narrative nationally is to get the stars to the big cities, and they're always on the star side unless they really step over the line, and especially when LeBron's involved in this case. So fans need to keep that in mind as well, no matter how unhappy as basketball fans they are that it couldn't work out with Davis. Because again, I believe it was only about 2 weeks before the request came down when Davis finally gave up. The only problem is he gave up and let his representation know that, who botched it for him. Yeah. So maybe he'll be forgiven in the future, in part if he decides to sit out after the All-Star break, whether it's saying he's injured or making it public and the league dealing with it the right way. And then time will heal all wounds there. But to make it look like the Pelicans haven't been trying to win just because they didn't get it right, or that this is a second-rate franchise, is ridiculous. And that's the thing that you wish the leadership would step up more. Like Gentry said once after a game and defending Gail Benson and her support, there needs to be more defense in that area about the points we're making, that they tried, it just didn't work, and they don't deserve to have a season end like this because it didn't work.
You mentioned it earlier. What about legacy? I mean, again, at the end of the day, he loves to be loved. I mean, can you really walk away from your original franchise with all these records and then, again, leave with a sour taste in the fans' mouths who have, again, supported you since day one?
Well, I think it goes back to how I mentioned he has people speaking on his behalf.
Yes.
And when it comes to Clutch Sports, obviously, and LeBron James, they've been speaking on his behalf through his sports agency. And so I think it became a monster that it was almost too big for him to be able to manage, especially with his personality, because he's so mild-mannered. He's non-confrontational. And so I think this almost became a little bit too big for him. But the point is, you doing it during this time specifically, at this window, it became not only public, but it was for a specific reason to go to Los Angeles. You could have done this behind closed doors, and you decided not to. And there were reports out there that the Pelicans, and if they're true or not, but I have no reason to believe why they wouldn't be at least partially true, because where there's smoke, there's fire, is that they were less interested in doing a deal because of how Clutch Sports and LeBron and all these guys wanted to basically bully them around and push them around. I would say from Gail Benson's part, I think that they need to come out and make a public statement. They need to let people know, the fans know, the ticket hold, the people who are giving them money to be able to keep this
The ones that are
franchise alive,
vested,
the ones
right.
that are invested in this. Give us a public statement to either come out against the NBA. Let us know what happened within your conversations with Adam Silver, what your plan is moving forward. Either get behind Dell Demps and this coaching staff, or announce that plans are going to be, there's going to be heads rolling at the end of the season.
Right.
I'm sorry, I'm spinning all outside
No,
of this
actually,
right now.
actually, you're 100% right.
But the point is, right now, there's a lot in limbo. It feels like when you're watching the New Orleans Pelicans, you don't really know who's in charge, and it's really frustrating to watch right now. And I empathize with the fans because from their standpoint, they don't know what they're getting because they're not being told what product is going to be out on the floor and the direction that they're moving. And so this whole thing has just been a circus. It's been mismanaged by everybody. And at this point, I think that Gail Benson and the Benson ownership group, all of them collectively, just need to eat whatever fine that the NBA is going to hand down and make them hand it down and spin this and say, you guys are trying to bully us. You mentioned the precedent with the other players that have been told to just go home, that didn't want to play for their given franchises, and point to that and say, just because he's a top 5 player doesn't mean he has to play. It's the exact opposite. We're not going to risk the future of our franchise just so that you can have a few more viewers on TNT tonight against Oklahoma City. That's absolutely absurd.
Yeah, no, a great point. And guys, if I can, I agree with Andrew. Ownership, look, and we talked about it before the show. You're in a situation with a rookie owner, okay? Call it what you want. She could have been watching with Tom Benson. She's a rookie owner in Gail Benson. And everybody wants to give her time to be able to kind of get her feet wet and to be able to set up the type of owner she's going to be. But then you got Mickey Loomis, who's being perceived as the guy that's over both franchises, which he is. But again, nationally in the NBA, it's a football guy running a basketball organization. So again, he can't step out and talk because then it plays right into the national narrative. Then you got a situation with Dell Demps, who is a dead GM walking, okay? They have put out enough statements, again, through sources locally, nationally, that they're cleaning house at the end of the season. So again, how can he come out and speak? And then you got Danny Ferry, who's sitting in the background, who had all the issues in Atlanta. One of the reasons why he's in the background is they may use his knowledge, but they don't want him out front with the organization. So now it's left on Alvin Gentry to have to explain this about what's going on. Again, someone in upper management has to step out and give the direction that the franchise is going, has to step up for the franchise, has to draw on the line in the sand with this Anthony Davis situation.
Well, you just did process of elimination. It clearly has to be Gail Benson at this point. They're in a situation they didn't want to be in. They knew that this could happen, that Davis was going to want to leave. I think they thought that this would go down either behind the scenes with a trade at the deadline that surprised people or came last minute, or happen in the offseason, which is what's going to happen. And then she should make a statement. But I just want to say that Pelicans fans need to take a deep breath and relax, because as long as Davis doesn't get hurt, he's still an asset who's going to be turned into players. And the way this went down, short-term pain could be long-term gain. It could be the best thing that ever happened.
I would agree.
Because if it would have been done properly behind the scenes by Davis's representation, then perhaps the Pelicans would have taken that Lakers deal. Maybe just enough vindictiveness did play into it and say, you know what, we're going to take the risk and we're going to wait. And I do believe that just between the New York Knicks and the Boston Celtics, the Pelicans can wind up getting a better deal there. They can wait for the draft lottery, perhaps wind up getting a Zion Williamson from Duke, who's the next superstar, #1 pick, coming down the pipeline, simply because they waited, because they were almost forced to wait rather than be bullied by the Lakers, who in the end didn't give a terrible offer, if you believe reports. They were pushing all in on the table. I just think that the headliners that offer aren't as good as a Jason Tatum, perhaps, of the Celtics, or the chance for Zion Williamson or a Kevin Knox, a rookie for the Knicks, as a headliner in the deal. Pelicans might have taken that deal in a different universe, in a parallel universe, but they didn't for the reasons we don't know for sure, but we can guess that went down. It may work out that next year's team is a lot better and beyond because of this short-term pain.
I would agree. Look, they didn't want to get bullied. They felt like they were bullied. Andrew, how can the commissioner ignore what's going on with Clutch Sports, LeBron James, and the Lakers right now? I mean, come on.
Well, it's funny when you hear different opinions out there that ask, well, who's really running the Lakers organization? And some people will actually come out and say that it's Rob Pelinka and Magic Johnson. It's not.
It's not.
Right. I can promise you right now, it's not. When LeBron James, and you see the same script everywhere he's been, whether it's the Miami Heat or with the Cleveland Cavaliers, he comes in, he is the management, he decides who the coach is, he decides what players they bring in, and he cleans house essentially, bringing in his guys. The truth is that, in my opinion, the Lakers deal is always going to be there.
Agree.
Because
Agree.
LeBron James is 34 years old.
Yes.
You think that at 35, he's going to just let them pass on Anthony Davis this summer without giving them the kitchen sink?
Exactly.
No way.
Exactly.
Because he would have to potentially wait until he's 36 years old. We've already seen him miss more games that kept him out for more than a month
With
this
a groin
year.
injury.
Eventually, he's going to break down. And I'm not saying that he doesn't have still good years left. He certainly does. But that engine's not going to run the same way that it has when he was 31 or 32 years old. He's eventually not going to be the number one guy. A couple years, he's going to be the number two. He needs Anthony Davis or someone else, whether it's Kevin Durant or whoever, to come in and be the number one. That's why I think no matter what, the Pelicans made the right decision not to fall to the peer pressure that was given by everyone across the league and the national media. And to wait this summer, because I agree with Jude 100%. If it's Jason Tatum and the Celtics, that's a better deal. Even if Jason Tatum's not in the deal, I probably would still lean towards that deal. But I think Jason Tatum is a big crux in that.
And Tatum's already said that he would be willing, at least through social media.
Which is good when it comes to
Right,
other
he doesn't
situations
have to
with
say
Eric
that,
Gordon
so he
and,
must
and,
mean it.
and others
Yeah.
where they came in.
He would like to be the
Everybody
face of a
remembers
franchise.
Yeah, I mean, people remember the picture with Eric Gordon where he's holding up the New Orleans jersey and he looked like he was not happy at all to be
And I
here.
guarantee you those guys coming from LA are going to have a similar picture.
Oh, there's no doubt about that.
But I would tell
Kyle
you this.
Kuzma? No.
If-
Lonzo Ball? No.
If you gave me the chance between the Lakers deal and say even the Celtics are off the table and it's the number one pick to go get Zion Williamson, I would take Zion Williamson and build around that with Drew Holiday and whatever pieces they're able to keep.
And they have some nice pieces with the Knicks as well, some young pieces they would give up.
And I have to say that back to your question about why is Adam Silver essentially sitting on his hands, look what they were doing during Super Bowl week, stealing headlines from the NFL during their biggest week of the year. They steal headlines every day with these stories. These soap operas help the league. Unlike screwing up the major call in an NFC championship game that puts the integrity of your sport into question, these type of stories are good for a league that reaches out to young people. Okay, this is drama. Vince McMahon's sitting back going, hey, Adam, don't say anything. This is good for business. It may not seem good for business in New Orleans, but it's good for business everywhere else.
More people were talking about the city of New Orleans that Super Bowl week than they were about the Rams and Patriots.
Hey, Andrew, it was calculated. Rich Paul says, I'm going to let you usurp the Super Bowl. You don't think it was calculated when they put that out there?
100%. You're 100%
Absolutely.
right.
He's going to say, this is what I'm going to do for you, AD. Nobody's talking about the Super Bowl. They're talking about Anthony Davis.
Yeah.
And that went on and still happening. So we can grab a call real quick. Hal, welcome to the show. Hey, Hal.
Hey, you guys. I love the show. Thanks for taking my call.
Thank you.
I always encourage my friends to watch the show. Listen, I've been thinking about this for a long, long time. I hear pro football players, coaches talk about how they don't pay attention to the media. They don't watch the shows. They don't read the papers. And what I'm always curious about is, like in the case, especially in the case of New Orleans with Gail Benson being a rookie at owning these teams, we assume that the management team knows a lot about how to run football, and I keep hearing that they don't know a whole lot about running basketball. Do you all know of any examples where management, ownership, has actually requested the opinion of you guys or any people that you know in the field, reporters who seem to have very strong opinions about what could and should be done?
Right. Hal, I'll get these guys to answer this quickly because we're less than a minute left. The answer is no, right?
No.
The answer is no. We're the enemy, okay? The answer is no. Now, if you get on the national level, you're a former coach, former player, you may have a little bit of cachet there. But guys that are reporters or guys like myself, a talking head, we're not getting much play.
Right, and there are a lot of guys over there to have power that they've built through the Saints side of things. If you bring in an all-powerful basketball guy, that guy's going to earn some power if he's successful. And I don't think there's some people over there on the Saints side that like that idea.
No doubt about it. Jude Young of CrescentCitySports.com, Andrew Doak of WLAE-TV Sports. Didn't even get to National Signing Day. We'll do that another time. Thanks for being with us tonight. Great discussion as always. Thanks so much for tuning in. Remember, there's a rebroadcast this program each and every Friday night right here on WLAE-TV. That's at 10 p.m. We're on statewide, Pelican Sports Television, 9 o'clock every Friday night. You can catch me on the radio, Sports 1280, 101.1 FM HD2, and the iHeart Radio app. That is noon to 2 weekdays. You can listen live, download the podcast at ericasher.com. All the previous episodes of Inside New Orleans Sports can also be seen at ericasher.com as well. Again, special thanks for our panel tonight. Fantastic. Andrew Doak, also Jude Young, also the WLA production staff, including Alex Chacon, Naila Jones, Ron Yeager, Jim Dotson, and my director, William Hill. Thanks so much for tuning in. Happy Valentine's to each and every one of you. We'll see you next week for another edition of Inside New Orleans Sports. Thanks for watching.